Donald Trump and Joe Biden continue to warm to crypto, at least it appears that way, and Australia celebrates another milestone for Bitcoin adoption. We cover all this right now in the Collective Shift weekly recap, actionable insights and a breakdown into the crypto market, all in under 30 minutes. Starting with the market update, and it's been a down week for cryptocurrencies broadly, led by Bitcoin and ETH, which are both down by 4% over the past 7 days at the time of recording. Bitcoin in between 66 and 67,000 US dollars, and ETH around 3,500. Solana, just for reference, is down 10%, so that's at $143 currently. What is the reason for this, slide in prices? One of the reasons was, sentiment related to the central bank decision last week, market sentiment broadly. It was not really the news that risk assets such as cryptocurrencies would have wanted, and I'll get to that soon. As I spoke about last week in the podcast, it was going to be the biggest news for the week, and it turns out it was. So look, we had the CPI data come out largely in line with expectations, so no real big takeaways here. The message you just really need to understand is that inflation is slowly coming back to the target range of 2 to early 2% in the US. So at the moment, I think it's around 3.5% on an annual basis. And even the core CPI, which is taking out volatile items like food and energy prices, that is still at 3.3% annually. So, key takeaway is it's still at an uncomfortable level, or I guess in an ideal world, this would be coming down towards 2.0%. So that afternoon, we got the central bank decision. As was widely anticipated, the central bank did not change interest rates, so that wasn't a surprise. What was quite surprising, and in my opinion, was, I guess, the main reason why we had a sell-off in cryptocurrencies and other risk assets, was that the Federal Reserve, shared their outlook for interest rates. And if you took the average of all the all the members of the Federal Reserve Board, the average of that was that, hey, we are expecting to cut interest rates once in 2024, or the rest of 2024, keeping in mind that they have yet to cut rates so far this year. So if we wind back about 6-7 months ago, you may remember that the market was anticipating the Federal Reserve to cut rates, maybe 5 to 6 in the most optimistic estimates, maybe 7 rate cuts for 2024, which was always a bit extreme in my opinion. But to have that consensus of, okay, maybe 5 rate cuts in 2024 so far, we're in June, we haven't seen any. And now the Federal Reserve has come out last week and shared their forecast that, hey, we think we're only going to cut rates once. So that is why risk assets such as cryptocurrencies really prefer a low rate environment. So when that news came out last week, there was a bit of a sell-off in the crypto market. I think what did get lost on people is that in their projections, they still anticipated to do a second rate cut at the start of 2025. So it is probably not as an aggressive cutting phase as the market was expecting. But at the end of the day, it's still looking very likely that rates have topped here, which again, overall, if you zoom out, is a really nice tailwind for cryptocurrencies broadly. Again, not the be all and end all. We have been rallying in prices while rates have been held steady and whatnot. So there are other reasons why cryptocurrency prices can go up, but this is a nice sort of tailwind to have now that rates have peaked. But that news coming from last week that, no longer is there an expectation that we're going to have multiple rate cuts. At least that's what the central bank thinks, which, again, I would emphasize previously they've been incorrect in their projections, but the market can only go off the information that they get. So that's why we saw a correction. But in terms of the week ahead for macro, pretty quiet now that we've had CPI and the Federal Reserve in 1 week. So pretty quiet in terms of the week ahead. over to the biggest news in crypto for the past week, and it was definitely to do with just warming towards crypto in terms of the increasing, I guess, politics involved in the US with respect to attitudes towards crypto. And by extension, I suppose, people placing bets or people's expectations of how the extent to which cryptocurrency and blockchain technology is going to be adopted, because it's long been known that we need a lot more comprehensive regulations before countries and industry players, such as in Australia and even in the US, more specifically, can, I guess, be more confident in, I guess, acting and being a part of participating in the crypto industry. And it would also be a big green light for major banks and other key players to also, I guess, expand into crypto. So with that said, this is, I guess, a bit of background of what's happening. But in terms of what happened last week, we did see just more signs of the two leading candidates, so Joe Biden and Donald Trump, for the upcoming presidential election in early November. It's been a really big talking point. I think I spoke about it in last week's podcast or the podcast before that. But yeah, even more examples of this story of these two presidential candidates who historically have been neutral to crypto at best. I think that's putting it too generously. I think it's more likely they've been anti-crypto to varying degrees at different times, but they certainly have not been fans of crypto, and that is certainly what they are now, I guess, expressing, or their campaign teams or their election teams, that is Biden and Trump's teams that are leading these elections, these campaigns rather. They are now getting involved in the crypto industry, something we have not seen at all in recent years. So, just last week, Trump here having a meeting with Bitcoin miners and tweeting or putting out posts on social media, on Truth Social, on, I guess, just Trump remarking about how he wants Bitcoin mining to be all in the US and whatnot. Again, like coming across as very supportive. And then we also saw Joe Biden, I suppose, in reaction to Trump's, I guess, increased involvement with cryptocurrencies. We also saw reports coming that, the Biden administration is going to be attending, or representatives from the Biden camp are going to be attending a cryptocurrency sort of roundtable in Washington, DC in early July. So that will involve not only big industry participants, probably Coinbase, I would assume, and maybe Uniswap, but also key policy makers as well, from both sides, I guess both houses in US Congress. So again, showing very strong, I guess, signs or a willingness to get involved in crypto. We also saw, just very quickly, other reports coming out here from the block. This was in late May, so 2 or 3 weeks ago. They were getting, sources telling them that, Biden's re-election campaign has started to reach out to key industry players. So, my takeaway, I'm not getting too, excited at this stage. I think it's encouraging to see, but again, like, will this translate into actual policies or law? That remains to be seen. It could really just all be talk and just wanting to get votes at this stage. That's probably the more pessimistic, I guess, view you can take. But it's certainly not. It's certainly not bad news. It's welcome news for sure. But hopefully, fingers crossed, a crypto investor's standpoint, but also just anyone involved and enthusiastic about crypto, you would want this to continue in the months ahead. And more importantly, you would want this willingness to get involved in crypto and create comprehensive legislation. You would want that to continue in 2025 and beyond once the election is done. Okay, moving across to some big news out of MicroStrategy. Just very quickly, they have announced. Well, they initially announced that they were wanting to raise more capital to invest in crypto, or in Bitcoin rather. So this started off as a $500 million raise. And they actually announced, I think just yesterday, that they were looking to, they are going to be increasing that amount by about 40%. I think it was to 700 million. So this is very significant in the sense that it's just another source of demand for Bitcoin. And these ones from MicroStrategy are a lot more genuine, I suppose, is probably, for lack of a better term, in the sense that they are investing in Bitcoin for the long term. It is not like, I guess there's a big difference between $500 million or $700 million of ETF inflows versus $700 million of MicroStrategy buying Bitcoin. As we've been covering recently, a lot of the ETF inflows, a decent size of those has been not from parties who are investing in Bitcoin. They're more so just trading it. So a big distinction there, and encouraging to see MicroStrategy continue to accumulate and I guess up the demand side pressure for Bitcoin. Over to Australia, and this came out yesterday. There was a big milestone in the sense that the ASX, so the largest exchange in in Australia, they approved the first Bitcoin Spot ETF. So that is issued by Van Eck. And this is a really big milestone because, yes, there's been spot Bitcoin ETFs accessible in Australia through other smaller exchanges, notably the CBOE, which was formerly known as the Chi-X or Chi-X. That's always been great. However, the ASX is just on a whole other level in terms of volume and reputation, and even more importantly, just I guess the depth of its integrations with other professional investors, other brokers who use and are tapped into maybe the infrastructure of the ASX versus a smaller exchange that doesn't do as much volume, notably the CBOE. So another milestone there for Australia. And key takeaway here is just accessibility to Bitcoin continues to improve, and that can only be a good thing. Speaking of ETFs, just a quick update on the status of the Ethereum spot Ethereum ETF. We know that it's sort of waiting to go through that second of two stages in the US in order for the spot ETFs to actually start trading. We've got a new sort of revised estimated timeline here from Eric Balchunas, the ETF analyst at Bloomberg. He is now having July 2nd as his sort of over under, or he's more or less his expected date when he would anticipate that these ETFs start trading. So that's just a small update there. Again, as a long-term investor in ETH, I'm not really too fussed whether it goes live, late June, early July, early August. It doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but that's just an update there, given it is such again, if you told me 6 months ago that an Ethereum ETF was going to be approved in the middle of 2024, I would not have believed you whatsoever. So again, a massive milestone for Ethereum and crypto more broadly. Exciting to see it go live just in a matter of weeks, really, by the looks of it. Okay, another major news item from last week was Paradigm announcing an $850 million fund to invest solely in cryptocurrency, the cryptocurrency industry. So to see that size, we saw these sorts of announcements like every other week, every month or so in the bull market, in 2021, 2022. However, we haven't seen as many of these announcements, in recent times, and that's been consistent with the broader venture capital space, which has sort of been on a cool down compared to years past. But that is a significant round by Paradigm, one of the more established and resourceful VC firms in the space. A really nice tailwind for the market more broadly, in the sense that the best teams will get funded and the best technology and the best solutions have a better chance at coming to market and gaining adoption, hopefully with this from Paradigm. So I will be keeping an eye on the teams that they are investing in. Always really good to be doing so for airdrop opportunities or even early investment opportunities. When you see signs that a tokenless protocol that's raised money from Paradigm often will lead to that token or that team announcing a token in the future. Of course, it's not the be all and end all. Like, it doesn't inherently mean that project is going to be extremely successful, but it's often, something that can accelerate research when you see, more reputable or powerful VC firms like Paradigm, when they're investing in a project, it's often a reason to take a second look at the project. Okay, onto some altcoin news. And yeah, something I've been noticing, particularly last week, but more broadly, is you're seeing a lot of these announcements. So for listeners here, it's the headline is Polygon Community Treasury announces grants program for builders, initially distributing 35 million Matic tokens. So yeah, what am I talking about here? They're really development funds or grant programs. Optimism is known for doing a lot of these, but really any layer one blockchain has to have one of these at this stage. Otherwise, they just can't get any developers across. And if you're not incentivizing users as well, a lot of them will just go elsewhere because everyone else is throwing big money or equivalent money in tokens at trying to, accelerate growth. The big reason why I'm just like bringing this up in this week's episode in particular, we got Polygon here, which, I think the big headline as well people were talking about was 1 billion tokens being allocated over the next decade for the sake of, long-term growth. And we also saw a similar announcement from Arbitrum. I think there were also some other projects last week that announced, similar, ecosystem funds, but Arbitrum's is $215 million worth of the ARB tokens. And that is going over 3 years, and that's targeted at gaming ecosystems. From an investment side of perspective, or just anyone who's investing in cryptocurrencies, I think one thing to understand is that these funds, the success of them is extremely important to follow, to monitor. In other words, is this Arbitrum $215 million gaming fund actually going to be justifiable in years to come when you look back, and once that grant program has finished, has it resulted and created more than $250 million worth of value to the Arbitrum ecosystem, and has it actually led to more demand? Secondly, has it led to more demand for the ARB token, maybe by way of a lot more users coming in, and maybe in years to come, Arbitrum will have a staking functionality and maybe a lot more, I guess, utility or reasons for purchasing the ARB token may come in years to come. But that's a question you have to ask yourself whenever you see these grant programs. Not really picking on Arbitrum or Polygon in particular. It's more so just a broader theme in the space where people may get excited about these headlines, like thinking that they're trying to drive growth, accelerate growth and whatnot, and get people to use their blockchain. But when it's all incentivized, you need to ask yourself what happens when the incentives sort of wash away. And what's the user retention going to be like after the incentives are wrapped up? And then if by extension, if the retention turns out to be terrible and a lot of the users just disappear and the developers, well, then this sort of growth fund or ecosystem fund has turned out to be, in a sense, just a wasted marketing expense or user acquisition expense or developer acquisition expense, where it hasn't actually resulted in any sort of revenue or profitability, however you like to think about it. But just something to think about, because in the meantime, while between the time when these grants get distributed and the time where they hopefully actually result in more developers and users coming to Polygon in this case, in that intermittent period or that interim period, you're going to see a sell pressure, all else being equal, a lower price of Matic, because these teams that receive the Polygon tokens are going to have to sell them to, I suppose, fund their operations, because it is a grant in this case they're receiving a grant to try to lure them across to build on Polygon. They have to sell the tokens to fund operations. Therefore, yeah, all else being equal, the Polygon price or the token price goes down. So again, very simple. However, it's just often, I don't see a lot of discussion about it within the crypto investor circles. At least I haven't seen it recently. So just wanted to highlight that, given we're in this season of a lot of heavy incentives going around. In other altcoin news, we saw Lido sort of getting involved in a restaking competitor to EigenLayer. So they were collaborating with a new project called Symbiotic and also Mellow Finance. So that is, yeah, noteworthy for sure. And I plan to be looking into Symbiotic more closely in the coming weeks, and also Mellow Finance. We also saw this long-awaited merger between, or much anticipated merger between SingularityNet, Fetch AI, and Ocean Protocol. That got delayed by around a month. So I think July 15 is now the date for that. And then finally, we saw Near Foundation. So there was this separate entity that got spun out called Nuffle Labs, and they raised $13 million in funding. So it's sort of, they're trying to be the data availability layer for Near, which has been doing a lot of work in terms of trying to compete, with the likes of, Celestia and Avail and whatnot. So looks like they're leaning more into that by creating this new entity called Nuffle Labs. So Near is one that I think is still progressing probably a lot better than the other quote-unquote Ethereum killers from 3 or 4 years ago that have sort of fallen to the wayside in terms of just user adoption and developer adoption. Like, they always used to be lumped in the same category as maybe like Phantom, which is still around, but not really doing too much, like, in relative terms. Terra was another one, which obviously has more or less left the space, even though it is technically still around. So Near Foundation, I think the Near blockchain is one that I continue to have one eye on, and it's one that I would like to spend some more time just seeing where they're at, because I know their Near.ai project is still unreleased, or they're still teasing that as well. So yeah, Near is one that I'm definitely keen to check out, and Nuffle Labs was, I suppose, the latest announcement from them. And finally here we've got LayerZero. They are teasing their token should be coming out this week, or at least details about the token, and by extension that would mean that the token should launch within the next I would say 3 to 4 weeks, just at a guess. We saw that ZK Sync launched their token last week, as I covered on the podcast, and that went live, I think, just yesterday or the day before, and has an FDV of about 4.5 billion, so fully diluted value of 4.5 billion US dollars, which is nearly, it's about a bit more than half of the value of Optimism and Arbitrum, which I believe are around the high $8 billion FDV. So that's sort of in line with what I would have expected. As I said, I wasn't receiving the ZK Sync token, so I didn't really have that much of a deep dive into the projections. But if you told me it was going to be about half the FDV of those two leaders, I would have said, yeah, that makes sense, given ZK Sync is still very far behind those two, given that it's gone all in on ZK roll-ups, which are inherently take a lot more technically, I guess, involved and take a lot more R&D, with the hope that they are so superior to optimistic roll-ups that they, I guess, just gain a bunch of users really quickly. That's the bet that ZK Sync is taking. So naturally, it would make sense that the valuation is a lot less at the moment, given that they don't have much to show for, I guess, their blockchain at the moment, or their layer 2 solution compared to those leaders. So LayerZero, the FDV, I would say a lot of people will just be comparing it to Wormhole's FDV at the moment, and taking it from there. But I guess we can't know too much at the moment, given we don't have the token details on the LayerZero token. So yeah, a lot more airdrops still coming in 2024, and we'll continue to keep members posted on the ones that we are focusing on as a team here at Collective Shift. But that will that's where I will leave it for this week. Thank you all for joining, and if you are looking for more insights, definitely subscribe to our Collective Shift weekly newsletter. That's delivered for free every Friday, so you can access that at collectiveshift.io/newsletter. That's collectiveshift.io/newsletter.